Proud to follow Leeds United.
BBC Radio Leeds.
Firstly, the premise on which the book is based on, Dave.
I think I said before when I spoke to you, Adam, this is about, I'm trying to do a series of historical ones. So the previous real one about the first title went 69. This takes it on to the next level. So it moves from 69 right through to 82. So it's part of us telling the story. So it goes, this is when Leeds really became Super Leeds, dominating everything, and then collapsed after Revie left. So it's just really interesting that massive fame, massive prominence they got. And then as soon as the guy left, they collapsed, disintegrated, fell apart, whatever they could do. And it's really just, as I did with Dirty Leeds, exploring that around the people. So talking about the directors, talking about the players, trying to tell the stories about it, what it was really like, just trying to do something a bit different. It's really just explain that next period through the 70s when we collapsed, and it's, dismal time for Leeds fans. There's more dismal times to come, but it was a dismal time.
It was quite close for Revie at that point. How close did he get, do you feel, to maybe, being at the end there? How significant a moment was that?
I think it was major. If you believe everything you read, he decided, he'd gone, Everton were pushing him, he told the players and all that type of stuff. And, there is a bit in the book about the aftermath of the Sunderland game, destroyed him. There was an after-match banquet, and he broke down in tears. He just absolutely destroyed him. So there were two or three things. It was devastating on the day. It was, could we still go again? I mean, the number of times they came back from disastrous previous seasons and built up. I think he'd run out of steam. It just devastated him. They'd still got the Cup Winners' Cup, the European Cup Winners' Cup final coming up against AC Milan, load of players out. And I think if not for that game, not so much the result, but if not for that game, he might have left. There was lots of stuff about paying prices board, and they withdrew the offer and things like that, so it might have fallen apart. But I think genuinely, when he saw the spirit that they put on against Milan, when they got a load of reserves in, just the fighting spirit there, I think that just revived him. And, it meant he was going to stay. There's lots of debate about it, lots of stuff in terms of he was only going for the money, and then when the money dropped out, he fell away. But I think there's much more to it than that. A proud man. He was devastated by what happened at Sunderland. He couldn't go out on that. He couldn't leave it after the Cup Winners' Cup final. He had to do something, not as a legacy, but to prove that Leeds were a really good side, to prove that Leeds were a wonderful team. He had to carry on. He felt he owed it to both the club and the players, not so much the directors, but he felt he owed that. So genuinely, he was all set to go. I think nothing was more certain. And then there was a change of mind.
I mean, what a season that followed. What does that say about him, and how deep you delve into that?
It goes into a fair amount of detail. There's about 3 chapters on that one season, trying to just explore it, really looking at, I suppose, just the restorative qualities, bringing people back. So he'd said many times before, we're going to go through the entire season undefeated. He said again that this time, and they won the first 7. I remember it was like, 2 or 3 years into my really fanatical period of Leeds. And I remember that it wasn't so much the way they were playing, it was the approach they were taking as well. So before, they had been derided by everybody for gamesmanship, giving referees a hard time, and they're trying to come across as white and the white at the same time. I remember the Tottenham game, 3-0 in London. Wonderful, fantastic game. And there's a bit in here about the referee talking to him afterwards, and just wanted to say he was talking about gratitude for making life easier for the referees, and that was heartwarming. So you'd gone from this, they were getting a kick in from everybody. Brian Clough wanted them relegated. I think that was for his own purposes, but there was this around. Suddenly they were everyone's favourite, white and the white, and the football was fantastic. And it wasn't just that they scraped a few wins, they were devastating people. Those first seven games destroyed. They lost a couple, they had a couple of draws after that, but then they were back on. So right through till Christmas, devastating form, but it was almost too good. And it's always with Leeds, you've got this thing about, you get the feeling in the stomach, you're almost too far ahead. And there was a bit of stuff just after Christmas about actually wanting them to lose the undefeated run just to take the pressure off, just take the pressure off. And it went 29 games, and then they came a cropper at Stoke. Major game, major passionate game where Stoke took us to the cleaners at the end, destroyed us. And it was almost there about, well, allows us to get back on track, allows us to do stuff. But there was another 3 defeats in about a month. And really there, we thought we'd lost it. Absolutely thought we'd lost it. And then they came back. They came back because Liverpool at that stage were going great guns. They hadn't dropped points. They've been going through for week after week after week, tracking us down. And they were getting there. And something happened in that last month or so. So they went through the final end of the bit, you know, coming through, finding themselves again. And in the end, they won by 4 points. Something to do with Liverpool collapsing, it's true, but they recovered from depths of despair. I mean, Burnley 4-1 at home, losing to Liverpool. It was devastating times. It was after what had gone before, after the previous years. Is it going to happen again? But now they came through that. Fantastic season. Fantastic season.
Amazing, really. And then obviously, as we know, he left to go for the England job and didn't take up the chance of leading them to the European Cup final glory. Now, in that European Cup final, which has been, I mean, it's been talked about, written about so much against Bayern Munich in '75 in Paris. Just sort of looking at yourself, Dave, you sort of remember it literally, I presume, through your own words, conversations you're having with yourself.
Yeah. So this was it was one of those bizarre things. This team that is accused of, you know, fixing games, this guy that had been fixing games, this club again was cheated. Not sure why it happened, but this referee, it was appalling. There was an early foul he let Terry Rollins get away with. Yorth should have probably been sent off. But ever after that, couldn't get a thing. Should have been 2 penalties. And I remember at the time, will we ever score? Will we ever score here? And then we thought we had, and then it was ruled out. But the referee had originally awarded it and was going back to the centre circle. Then he seemed to suddenly remember, Beckenbauer in his ear. Beckenbauer should have given away 2 penalties earlier on, should have been found guilty. Then told him, look at this offside flag. What offside flag? Oh, yeah, right. Okay, Franz. And went back and give him offside. Killed us. And then straight after, they scored 2 goals. Absolutely devastated. But you get the "We are champions, champions Europe" dates back to that day. So the chant, and people, the Leeds fans honestly believe, and they still do, that we won that game. Just when we'd beaten Milan the year before, but we were cheated. Fantastic game, but you know, it's typical Leeds. Could have been the highlight of every player's career. It's ended up the worst moment when the entire thing was over. So all the years with Revie, although he'd gone, all the years with Revie were over. They played on a number of them. Giles gave up after that, or with Leeds, moved on to West Brom. But that was our time. That was over.
And then as you take the story through to 82, and obviously things did go downhill. I mean, just how rapid and how stark was the decline? And yeah, I suppose you can put a line in the sand at 75, Dave, but what really was the turning point for you? Or was it a combination of things that took Leeds down?
I think what it was the expectation. So it was always we should be at the top, and that was unrealistic. I think Jimmy Armfield, when he came in, did a fantastic job. After Clough, he did a fantastic job, and he was just getting through. Signed Tony Currie. There was starting to be something again. They were actually doing fairly well. So they're in the top 5, 6. They didn't really look like winning the league, but they're a really good side, doing really well. Tony Currie was a fantastic signing, made a real difference. But Armfield was still getting rid of, moving the old guard on, and we're going through that. They were still doing really well, but it wasn't quite the same. And you had the thing with McQueen and Jordan going to Man United, and that was about, actually, we're no longer a buying club. This is Man United coming through, buying our best. And something happened at that stage. And at the end of the season, I think it was then, they didn't renew Armfield's contract. They could have done, but one of the worst mistakes they ever made. He would have probably taken us on. I'm not sure how successful he would have been, but they went for a bigger name, Jock Stein. But he was on his way to Scotland, so he was using us. And then they went this odd appointment with Jimmy Adamson. It should have been a good appointment, but he was past his best, and that was what really happened. That and Tony Currie going, it killed us, and it was never the same again. Never the same again. So you got Adamson out. They hated Adamson. They wanted him shot. Lots of stuff about he was a drinker. He'd lost his touch and all that type of thing. A lot of disaffection. Players going by the wayside. His buys were no good. But, they were always judged by Revie's time. So he was never going to be the same. He didn't really get a chance. But, everything went against him. And from there on, after Currie went, it was never the same again. Almost doomed to go down, no matter how long it took. Doomed to go down. He was hounded out, and they replaced him with Allan Clarke, and he was the guy that took us down in the end. And that's bizarre, isn't it? Like one of Revie's boys taking us down. Had a real honeymoon period, it said. So first game draw with Man United, and he was the saviour. Made us hard to beat, hard to score against, but couldn't do it when the going got tough. And we had the disastrous season after, bad to worse, and what happened. We collapsed, second division, and all that goes on from it. But this takes us through to that relegation, and what happened along the way.
So, in your opinion, then, Dave, and knowing the time, was the squad good enough to have stayed up? Was it a travesty that Leeds went down when they did, or did you expect it?
No. I think it was around. We knew we weren't good enough to challenge, but we still thought we were mid-table, top table. We still thought we were good enough. We had this disaster result first game against Swansea. Now it was 5-1, but it didn't look like that. First half, we were actually level, so we were going okay. We got some decent players, but they didn't play up for it. He brought in Peter Barnes and he went walkies, so he hadn't got a goal scorer. That was the problem. He tried to get a goal scorer, but he came back with Peter Barnes, and he hadn't got a man to score. Now, later in the season, they got Worthington, but it was too late. But they just couldn't score for love nor money. Too many losses, too many draws. And what it was the first year where it was 3 points for a win. And you get this story about under the old rules, they would have stayed up. I'm not sure about that because they weren't that decent aside. But you got a disastrous run after Christmas and they really fell by the wayside. And it had been on the cards the last 3-4 months. It looked like they were going down. They fought, they came back, and they were almost into they could stay up. So I had this game right at the end against West Brom. Beat West Brom or even draw, they'd have been stayed up, but they took them to the cleaners. Those months were disastrous. There was this thing just before the West Brom game where they beat Brighton, came back from a goal down 2-1, and Clarke was celebrating in front of the fans like he won the championship. But they collapsed after that, and then it was they went mad in the streets. West Brom in Birmingham wrecked the place, wrecked the joints because they'd been suffered a lot from hooliganism and everything that had gone along with that. And the other clubs hated them. They'd had years of this, trouble in the grounds. It was when hooliganism was rife, and they were among the worst. So trouble dog Leeds like a bad smell. It was everywhere. And I think that the first division was heartily glad to see the back of them. I know West Brom were, and that's maybe why they ended up not turning up in the game they got left against Stoke. So if West Brom had beat Stoke in the end, after everybody else had played their games, we'd have been up, but there was no chance. Foregone for us, I think it was.
Well, there's a lot.
You're depressing me here, Adam. Get me on the fucking
Well, I mean, look, I think that there has to be an element of being able to sort of retell these stories and these tales and from different perspectives, Dave, and yours will be one and others might see it a bit differently, but fundamentally you've got to learn from your history.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably, there is a proliferation, I would say, particularly now. I don't know, maybe it's because of COVID and lockdown and what have you, people have more time to think. There's lots of books about Leeds coming out at the moment as well. So I think the thing, why is yours a bit different, would you say? What's your sort of USP, would you say?
I think for me, it's trying to get into the heads of the fans, trying to get in the heads of the directors and into the heads of Revie. So I do this bit where I create conversation that happens. So talking this one and some of the others about this group of fans that were watching them and what they're actually doing, talk about what that was like, talk about, the songs and how they really felt, try to go into a bit more depth. But from the point of view, I try and do this from people's perspective. So it's not just a straight retelling of the story. It's not just a straight recounting the results. It's not just prose about, how they did in the competitions. It's about really what it was like at the time as being someone that was integrally involved and watching them, the infighting, how the directors really always resented Revie. There's quite a lot in the first chapter about Allan Clarke joining and stories about his conversation with Revie at the time. So I tried to do this, imagining what it was like, and then just use a bit of poetic license to really get over this. This is what it was at the time, and it's a very, very different time. 50 years ago now, but it could be 300 years. Different world then, Adam, and I just try and capture that.
And where can people get the book then from, Dave?
Okay, all the usual places. So you can get it on Amazon. If you do a search for this, you can get it there. If you contact me on the mightyleeds.co.uk website, you can get some from me. I have to autograph and do all that. But it's through the normal chat channels. You can get it to other shops, but it's mainly via Amazon.
And how's it been received so far?
It seems to be doing really well. So I had a bit in the Yorkshire Evening Post not so long ago, and the sales have been really good. It came out on Christmas Eve, and I was surprised how well it did. The previous one, the Dirty Leeds one, did really well as well, and is still selling pretty well, and that's a couple of years ago. This is doing really well to say it's only just started, because I think people love this time. They love reading about it. They've heard these stories before, but they love being in this period when Leeds were in a situation that they've lived on ever since. It's lovely now to be in the Bielsa times, and this bitching about the transfer window, forget it. Think what it's like back over 40, 50 years, what we've had over the last few years. Think about 10 years ago. Fantastic time to be a Leeds fan. Fantastic time to be a Leeds fan, both then and now, even the lows.
Proud to follow Leeds United.
BBC Radio Leeds.